Sage, thanks for taking the time to come on the podcast and have this discussion. Just to kick things off, do you mind just introducing yourself, what it is you do on a day-to-day basis, or what you're involved in?
Yeah, totally. Thank you for having me. So my name is Saje Dyer. I live in New York City. About 2 years ago, I graduated with a master's in mental health counseling psychology. I intended to use that degree. However, things have turned out a little differently. My husband and I opened a restaurant around the same time that that I graduated with that degree, and the restaurant has kind of taken up most of our time, including mine. So, and then about a year ago, I found out I was pregnant, a little surprised, a little unexpected. So that also took things down a different road. So right now I have a 4-month-old, and that's been incredible and totally unexpected part of my journey at this point. And so we do the restaurant. I'm also writing a book with my sister Serena. My father was Wayne Dyer, who passed away a few years ago, and we're writing a book about the experience of losing him and how it kind of thrusted us into a different place in our life where where I was forced to grow up and really to apply his teachings in a new and different way. And it's been quite an experience.
So what sparked an interest in getting involved in or being a restaurateur?
So my husband's family, he's Italian, and they've been in the restaurant business their whole lives. They're not their whole lives, but his father, his grandfather, they've all been in the restaurant business. So, my husband was working at a hotel and he was unhappy and he, just very corporate and just not the life he wanted. So we said, why don't we, we had an opportunity. We found, we knew somebody who was trying to get rid of a restaurant and it was already set up, and it was just a good opportunity to jump in and do it. So without a lot of hesitation, we jumped right in, and it's been exciting and fun. It's a very social job and career and business, and it's also, it's very challenging. It's very time consuming. But I would say it's been a lot of fun. It's been a learning experience for sure.
And where is it located? I assume New York, but whereabouts?
Yeah, we live in the city. The restaurant's in the East Village of Manhattan.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was in New York a few years ago for work. I stayed in, I think it was Lower East Side.
Yeah, that's very nearby.
Like a Loch near there. Yeah, a lot of really nice restaurants. I spent most of my time just walking around and eating. I did like a food tour for the 2 days I was there, and then I just came back to Toronto. I'm actually in Toronto, so it's not too far.
Okay, yeah.
Quick little 1.5 hour flight or something like that. So.
Yeah, the East Village and the Lower East Side are really some of the last neighborhoods where you find mostly family-owned restaurants, not big corporate restaurants. So, yeah, it's a little more unique.
Your initial plan, or what you had, your background is in, is it therapy and counseling type of stuff relating to mental health?
Yeah, exactly. I have a degree in mental health counseling, so which is psychology, but it specifically licenses you to be a counselor.
Okay. And what got you started down that path? Did it have to do with your father? Because he seems to be somewhat involved in that.
No, totally. When I was in college, I was a pre-med, and I was also a biology major, which usually goes hand in hand. But after about the first year of college, I learned that you didn't have to be a biology major to be pre-med. And so I decided to switch my major to psychology and still complete the pre-med aspect. And I found that by the time I was done with my 4 years, I just was much more interested in the psychology aspect of everything. And so after graduating and sort of meandering for a year, I thought, why don't I, because, a degree in psychology for an undergraduate degree doesn't really license you or enable you to do very much. So I decided to move to New York. I was living in Florida, moved to New York and get a master's from NYU doing this. And I wanted to, it was also, at that time my dad was alive and I was bouncing my ideas off of him. And of course, he was always the type of parent who said, I can't tell you what to do. You've got to decide for yourself what's right for you. But I saw how his career took off, and it started with being a counselor. He got a doctorate in psychology, and he started out counseling students and then clients afterwards. And I read some of his early books, and I thought, this is really fascinating to me. Just helping, it's not giving advice, it's helping people find their own advice, their own truth, and just really forming a relationship with people, which I thought sounded interesting to me. It excited me.
Mm. And do you find that like what you're doing now, especially with the course that you're launching, or have you already launched that course? It's like a 1 week.
We actually, yeah, we already concluded it. We did.
Nice.
Yeah, we did it. My sister and I did a 6-week. Yeah, I guess you could call it a course. I mean, we just kind of decided to launch this without a lot of structure, and we had never done something like this before, but we made a couple posts about it on our Facebooks that we were doing a 6-week course where we would be posting videos each week, just her and I discussing things that we've learned, insights we have, and that we would also interact with the people in the group. It was a private group, and it was just such a huge success. We've received so much positive feedback that we're definitely going to do it again and do it more, and it was great.
Do you feel that that's like a full circle coming back to getting more involved and getting with like therapies and psychology in doing these courses?
Yeah, they're definitely along a similar path. I mean, you know, a lot of the people, I didn't know that it was going to be that way, but in this group, a lot of the people sort of treated it like a counseling type of group. They would ask for advice, and then we would find ourselves in the next video addressing these people's questions and giving them, not advice, but just, you know, this is how I see your situation. Maybe this sheds some new light on it for you. And it's definitely full circle, and it all goes hand in hand. It's all about serving others and helping people find their own light. So I don't think you have to do that in any specific capacity to be helping and serving other people.
Okay, so now your relationship with your father, from what I gather from your post, it seemed like you two were fairly close. I assume your sister as well.
Totally, all of us.
Yeah.
I've got 7 siblings, so there's 8 of us all together. I'm the youngest, and we were all very close family.
Yeah, 8 is a big family. So where did you grow up with 8 kids?
I grew up in South Florida for the most part, but we would spend our summers out in Hawaii as a family. So between Florida and Hawaii.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And now, was your father running retreats in Hawaii or like seminars and doing lectures there at the time?
Definitely at times. I mean, probably 1 to 2 seminars a year were done in Hawaii, but for the most part, he would travel. So his tours would be booked in he would do an East Coast tour, so he would be gone for a month, you know, and then he'd be home for a month, and then things like that. He would do an Australia tour. He did a lot of Canada tours.
Was your family often in the spotlight as he would be hosting these things? I know he would generate a lot of buzz, get a lot of attention from what he was doing, and a lot of people, to this day, a lot of people are still very, very much impacted. Their lives are impacted by his words, by his books, by a lot of his work. So
yeah, I mean, I get messages from people all the time saying that he changed their lives, which is such a beautiful thing to receive. But yeah, we were in the spot, you know, growing up, I didn't realize that it was, you know, in the spotlight, but we were to a degree. I mean, when we were in school, you know, obviously my dad would travel a lot and we wouldn't go, but there was certainly a number of times each year that we were at these events, and I would realize how special my dad was, and all these people were there to see him, and I would feel inspired just sitting in the audience. I mean, anyone who sat in the audience of a talk of my dad's or saw it on recorded, you know, on a recording, I'm sure has felt inspired, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have as well, and that's actually how I came across what you were doing with the two-week course or
6 months. 6 months, yeah.
What is it actually being called? Is it like a call it course or a seminar? Or
we called it a group is what we called it, but I think a course is probably a more appropriate word, yeah.
Okay. And you see yourself sort of expanding on that and growing that. Is your sister interested in that to the same degree that you are?
Yeah, you know, it was actually her idea. So her and I have done a number of speaking engagements and interviews and stuff together. We also are writing this book together. So she decided to launch this Facebook group without consulting me. But then so many people started signing up, and she said, you know, this might just be too much for just me. Will you do it with me? And I said, I'll do it with you, but if I'm going to do it with you, I'm going to do it with you. So we're going to, you know, I don't want it to be like when you feel like you have nothing to say, I'll chime in. I want it to be like we split it and do this together. So she said, yeah, that's what she wanted to. And yeah, we ended up doing it together, and I think we'll definitely do more. We're still sort of decompressing from that group. Just ended about a week ago, and then she just got back. We were all out in Hawaii as a family, so we finished the group up out there. I'm back. She just got back, and I think we'll start to talk about, you know, next steps. And people in the group are already asking, when are you doing another one? When are you doing another one? So we know that there's a desire for sure.
Yeah, it seems like it. And the book that you're working on, is it sort of revolving around the same topic? Does it have to do with mental health and you know, awareness?
You know, it's really more about our dad and the process and journey of, you know, him leaving his physical body, and how just, you know, one of the ways that we phrase it, our dad used to talk about how, I think it was Carl Jung, studied about how you have the morning of your life, the afternoon of your life, and the evening of your life. And then when you're in the morning of your life, it's all about your ego, and it's your body, and it's the way you look, and how much money can I accumulate, and it's all surface level. And then at some point you're thrust into the afternoon of your life, and where you're contemplating deeper meanings, and what am I here for, and what does this mean? And so what we feel like is when we lost our dad, I was certainly in the morning of my life. I mean, I was 25 years old. I was, you know, I cared about partying with my friends, and, you know, I just very surface level, and just normal things for a 25-year-old, no judgment there. But my dad passed away, and it sort of made me start thinking about, what is the meaning of life? What are we here for? You know, and I was searching so much for my dad and missing him in such a deep and profound way that I found myself listening to his recordings and videos and reading his books all the time. And for the first time, I felt like his teachings applied to me in a totally different way. And so I was able to gather so much more from them. And so it was like we were thrust into the afternoon of our life unprepared, and sort of in the end found that we were prepared, that our dad and our mom and my whole life had prepared me for that moment. I just believed that I wasn't prepared, you know. So the book is about that, just stories and what we learned, things that happened. You know, I don't think before my dad passed away, I had never lost somebody that I was very close to before. So I didn't think much about what happens after we leave our bodies. What did I believe, that we die and that's it? Or did I believe that our souls go on? I wasn't really sure. I didn't really think about it one way or the other. So, you know, after he passed away, I just felt like my beliefs were really solidified. And there have been so many signs and miracles and really awesome things that happened that confirmed that for me. And also just this experience of growing and becoming a more compassionate person from losing somebody you love.
And that's a sign of a really good teaching, is your father's words that would have re-inspired you or kindled something in you later in life. You may have read them initially, and they may have just, you know, what in one ear of the other, but later on you come back to it, and it becomes this really nice, impactful teaching for you. And that's a good sign of someone that's produced really great works, and it stands the test of time. Like, if it goes beyond him passing, people are still reaching out to you, still impacted by it, still affected by it. And now you're kind of just like picking up the torch, really, so to speak. So do you find that having a child now is bringing, it's also kindling something renewed and revitalizing you in some way, and bringing some purpose or meaning that you were looking for?
I mean, I'm married, and I was married when I found out I was pregnant, and we had talked about, my husband's 7 years older than me. I'm 29, almost 30. He wanted to have children right away, and I said, you know, I want to wait a little bit. I still think that I want a little bit more time. It turns out that, you know, the universe had different plans for me, and we got pregnant right away without trying or really understanding how or when, without going into specifics there. But so I found out I was pregnant, and if I'm being completely honest, I was shocked, and I was not happy. I was really quite stressed and distraught about. I felt like my life was, as I knew it was ending. I felt like I wasn't going to have anything in common with any of my friends anymore. But, you know, here in New York, 30 might not sound young to have a kid in most places, but in New York, I think it kind of is. I think people wait a little bit longer. Not that that matters, but I was thinking all of these things. I wasn't going to, I had been traveling a lot. That was going to have to stop. And I just kept running through my mind all the negatives of this. And got to a certain point where I realized that I was finding myself in a situation where I didn't really have a choice. Not saying that people don't have a choice, but for me, it wasn't a choice. I was in a position to have this baby, and I was going to have him. And I realized that I was just going to have to surrender to this situation, because otherwise I would spend this entire pregnancy miserable. And you know, I think everything that happens to us happens for a reason. And so I decided to surrender to the situation and say, I can't do anything about this, so I'm going to find a way to be happy about it. I'm going to stop, because if you look for things that are wrong and if you look for the negatives, you're going to find them. But if you start looking for the positives and you start thinking like, well, this is a miracle. How lucky am I that I got pregnant so easily? How lucky am I that a child chose me to, because that's what I believe, that our children choose us to be their parents, and that he chose me, and that he came into my life as quickly as possible, and that I'm going to get to experience a whole new kind of love, and become a parent and a mother for the first time, and that this is nothing but an exciting time in my life. And so when I made that shift into just changing my thoughts, which didn't happen in an instant, it was a daily reminder. When I would start going down this negative rabbit hole, it was a daily remembering to, no, there's nothing to be scared of. There's nothing to be upset about. It's okay to feel scared and upset, but look at all of the positives that are coming out of this. Look at all the love and anyway, fast forward, you know, he was born on April 5th, and it's been an explosion of love, and it's been the most incredible thing. I've watched my husband's family come together in ways that they hadn't come together in years. I mean, it's amazing what a child can do to a family. And to me, I mean, it's just, I used to consider myself a person who wasn't emotional, and I find myself crying at the silliest things, but I love it. You know, I just feel more in tune to life, and I feel wiser, and I feel that I see the meaning of life in a different way, you know, just through his eyes daily.
That's really neat. And it is, it's something like that the ego and the mind tends to dissect things in such a negative way, as you were describing, and it's so willing to do so. It's like the default in a lot of cases, right? You really have to make that effort to turn over every stone you can to find every positive outcome that you can possibly fathom. Right. And often cases, those are the ones that end up being more true and more real than the negativity. And so it's pretty interesting.
I mean, my dad always said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And it's so true in every situation. It's just choosing the right thoughts. It's, you know, you can be a host to God. He used to always say, you can either be a host to God or a hostage to your ego. And it's like your ego will try and take over and tell you to be jealous, to be mad, to be upset. But so you can fall victim to that, or you can you know, overcome that, and you can be a host to God and just see the love and the beauty and the unfolding of life in every situation that you find yourself in. Because I do think that there's something beautiful to be found in any situation that you're in.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it. Yeah, a host to God. I love that saying. It actually reminds me of another saying of a mentor of mine, Lama Surya Das, who's a Dzogchen Tibetan Buddhist Lama monk. He has one that you're a pseudopod for God. It's just very similar. Everyone's just walking around God in their different skin, their different forms. Right. I feel like when you take on the negative attributes, you're putting on like costumes, and they're all just false, you know? And they all just like create this illusory experience that, you know, it is just that. It's complete illusion and delusion. Yeah.
It can paint a situation that's full of beauty into one that's awful, and it's your choice, you know? Yeah,
yeah. So I want to dial back a bit to what you were saying a second ago about your child choosing their birth. This is something I actually believe in. It's like an intuitive belief I have, that a child chooses their birth and actually has a general idea of their circumstances up until the age of perhaps even 10, 15 years old. So is that something that you came up with yourself, or is it something you kind of inherited this thought process from your father? How did you come to that conclusion or thought?
Both my parents, my whole life, have said to me, you know, that you chose us to be your parents. And then sometimes they would say it in funny ways, you know, like, well, don't get mad at me, you know, for this, because you chose me. You know, my dad always used to tell the story of my sister Serena would just be she would be 10 years old or something like that, and just on top of him and saying like, you're this and you're that, and you shouldn't be this way and you shouldn't be that way. And he would say, you know, you just got to blame yourself in this situation. And she said, well, why do I have to blame myself? And he said, because you chose me to be your dad. And I guess she said back, well, I must have been in a hurry then when I made that choice, because, and she was just kidding. But I totally believe that our children come here for us and for them, and that it's that they choose us. I just think that that's how it works. I don't think that we're just random. You know, these little people, they come in with personalities and with desires and with a purpose, and I think that it's all perfectly lined up with the people that they choose to be their parents. My dad used to also refer to his, he had a childhood where his father, he actually never met his father. His father walked out when he was just a baby. His father was an alcoholic and ended up dying years later. So my dad never met him, but he spent a number of years looking for him and upset and angry and on and on. And he was in foster homes for a few years because his mother, she had 2 other sons, and she couldn't afford to take care of them on her own. And, you know, he spent his childhood and his younger years upset about that, but he realizes now that he believes that the father that he had taught him self-reliance and taught him to be the person that he was, so that he could go on and help other people and teach them self-reliance. And so, you know, again, it's like something that seems like a curse. It's truly a blessing. And my dad actually did a short film called My Greatest Teacher. And he, you know, has always said that, you know, he's always said since he realized this, that his father was his greatest teacher. And even though he was somebody who he hated for a number of years, and had to get to a point where he could love him to realize that his father was his greatest teacher. But once he got to that point, you know, he gave thanks and was grateful for the father that he had, even though he didn't really have this man in his life at all. But it started him, it paved the path for him to be self-reliant and to want to help other people. And yeah,
I think it takes a lot of maturity to be able to dissect something like that, your own circumstance, your own upbringing, and then to be able to pull out the positive, kind of like we were just speaking of a moment ago. I find a lot of people they'll use their upbringing almost like an excuse for their current situation in life, and rather than dissecting it as your father did, it's like they just let it weigh them down constantly. And it just gets back to seeing the negative in everything. And that's why I really love the idea or the concept of picking or choosing your birth and having it being, as you said, perfectly in alignment with everything else, because it removes that excuse. You know, it basically says, like, you made this choice, you're here, and you need to then develop some sort of foresight rather than awaiting that hindsight, you know, rather than waiting for later in life, and you have to reflect back and say, oh, it was this way to develop me to be who I am today. But to just try and make that initial switch early on and then develop that foresight, have that understanding, I think it's something that a lot of people need to work on, because it gets them so caught in the now, always in the now, thinking of, you know, just whatever situation they would have grown up with. It sounds great and wonderful if you grow up in like a multi-millionaire family with, you know, rainbows everywhere and unicorns all over the place, you know, and you're like, oh, I chose this birth, wonderful. But a lot of people, like, they get brought up in the Congo, you know, and their mother's a prisoner, and there's just crazy situations. So to then have that foresight and that understanding, and to be as optimistic and positive as possible, to really pick it apart and see that this could be developing you like a diamond gets carved out of a big mountain stone, you know, it just develops you just that much better.
There's actually that reminds me of a quote. If you shield the mountain from the windstorm, you'll never see the beauty of the carvings. And there's another one that's the wound is where the light shines in. It's like sometimes it's the battles and the hardships of our lives that make us into the people that we want to be. And like what you were saying, I think that a victim mentality will never serve you. No matter what kind of terrible upbringing you've had or what kind of streak of bad luck you've had or whatever it is, if you feel bad for yourself, you're not going to grow from it. You know, if you're saying this is not my fault, this is somebody else's fault, this was done to me, you know, and I know that that's hard not to do. I mean, some people are just handed a really bad set of cards, and but it's changing the way you look at things, and it's shedding that victim mentality and every opportunity, because that is where you will start to see the growth. Take responsibility. Like you said, you chose this life, this birth, these parents, and there's something in it for you to learn, and there's a way for you to grow, I think, always.
Do you have any actionable advice for someone that would be, that they realize this, that, and they want to start shedding that victim mentality? Something to the extent of, do they walk more in nature? Do you have any meditative practice or routine that you do that helps bring you into a positive resonance or anything like that you could suggest someone apply in their daily life?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's all kinds of self-care routines and rituals that you could get involved in, and it's really what works for you. But I think the biggest thing that you should try and achieve from those self-care practices is changing your thoughts, because it's this dialogue that's going on in your mind all the time that never stops, and that is your reality, whether you realize it or not. So if your reality is one of, poor me, this happened to me, it's not my fault, you've got to just catch those thoughts and slowly shift them. And I from what I find, our mind is like a muscle. So, you know, if you say it one time, it's not going to mean anything. But if you start to make it a practice and you work your mind out like that every day doing it, it will become a habit, and it will become easy, and it will become second nature. But it's like working out. It's like trying to get in shape. If you just do it once, it's not really going to make much of a difference. It's a practice. It's a daily practice. And I think one of the biggest things for getting your mind in a better place is meditating. And I think that I go through phases with meditation. I'll be really good about it for a month or 2 months, where I'm meditating every day, 15 to 20 minutes a day. And then I'll get off of that wagon and you know, forget doing it for a couple months. But when I'm in the practice where I'm meditating and making the time, I am a calmer person. I'm a more thoughtful person. I'm a more intelligent person. I'm more compassionate. But even bigger for me has been, I feel that I can sense my Father's presence around me more. You know, there's that, it's almost like a curtain between us and the other realm. And when you meditate, I think that curtain becomes a little more sheer. And when you don't, I think it's more like a wall, you know. Mm-hmm. And that has been the most impactful thing for me with meditating.
I haven't had too much experience with people like loved ones that have passed, but I have a sense that when you do get into that space, that meditative space, that there's something that comes to mind. It's that your hearts, the two hearts, beat in union to the drum of the universe. It's like you're connected. You're always connected. And it's like you said, that veil. It's just that veil drops down as you're going around the world and checking emails and doing all this other stuff. And it's like you forget that connection. So, but I feel that all those emails and everything else, it's back to the illusion. You know, it's all part of that illusion, a part of this game of having this human experience. And we constantly forget this deep-rooted connection that we have with Source, with God, with love, that is shared and common across all humans. So it's great that you can get into that space and really connect with your Father in that way. Did he have any particular practice that he employed on a daily, weekly basis?
Yeah. My dad was definitely a very ritualistic type person. So he was the type that, like, if he said he was going to do something, then he was going to do it every day, no matter what, even if, you know, he had the flu. So my dad exercised every day. I mean, when he was younger, not too young, up to like his 60s, he ran every single day of his life, at least 7 miles without missing a day. And a funny story, he was once flying to Australia or flying back, I'm not sure, but you skip a day. Like when you fly from the East Coast of the U.S. to Australia, you miss an entire calendar day. It goes from being like the 20th to the 21st or the 22nd. So he had made a commitment that he was going to run every single day. So he ran on the airplane up and down the aisle just so that he wouldn't miss that August 21st, whatever it was. So that's the level of commitment and keeping your word that my dad had in his life. But he meditated. I mean, my mom still is the real meditator of the family. Never misses a day. Even when she had 7 children, most of us little kids living in the house, she found the time to meditate, and she would put a sign on her door that said, "Mom is in meditation for 20 minutes. Do not disturb." And we knew, like, unless it was blood or, something really serious, we were not to disturb her for those 20 minutes. And, but yeah, and my dad, towards the end of his life, he had a diagnosis of leukemia, and, a whole series of events that, at first he really bought into this diagnosis, and he was very scared and buying into a lot, not buying into, I mean, it's real. Cancer is real. But I'm just saying for him, for his experience, he was just a lot on the fear side of it. And eventually he had a shift where he decided to just see this as a miracle and to take control of it instead of letting it take control of him. And that led him to doing green juices and just alkalizing his body. He gave up gluten and he got really into health rituals, eating healthy and eating light and things like that. But when he said he was going to do something like that, he was committed. So he had a lot of.
And at what age did he pass?
He was 75.
75. Okay.
Yeah.
And how old is your mother right now?
She's going to be 69 in December.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did she get involved at all with what you do with regards to like these new seminars, courses?
Yeah, we brought her in a couple of the videos that we did. She talked about just because our mom has an incredible story too. She's given birth to 7 children every single time with no drugs. And as someone who just went through labor and birth, I can tell you that is impressive because 4 hours in, I was begging for an epidural. And it was just one of the craziest and most miraculous, but also most intense and challenging days of my life. And I cannot believe she did that 7 times without drugs. But so she told a lot of those stories, and she just talked about how meditation has served her, and it's the silence. And I forget who said it, but I forget who said it, but God's one and only voice is silence is a quote that I grew up hearing a lot. And so it's like, if you want to hear God, you got to find that silence. You got to find that void, because it's, our dad used to say it's the space between the notes that makes the music. So, it's the silence. And I have found that is true. When I make the time for the silence in my life, even just 10 minutes, it makes a huge difference. So our mom came into these videos and she shared her experiences with childbirth, with meditation, some of her just things she learned being married to my dad for so many years. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you would have a great perspective on a lot of different things.
Totally.
Where do you see this going with regards to courses over the next few years? Do you have a bigger vision for it? Do you have something you've planned out or you're spoken to your sister about? Now that you've tried this first one and sort of gotten the gist of I know it's kind of an evolution as you go. You're obviously going to improve upon it as you go, but have you thought of where it could be?
Yeah, we've so like I said, we're working on this book and we're almost done with it, and we're shopping it around to publishers as we speak. And I think that once that comes out, we definitely want to be getting on some kind of stage, whether that be a literal stage, a virtual stage. It seems like a lot of where this sort of work is heading is, things like this, podcasts and YouTube channels. And so we're looking into that. We would like to take the videos that we already made, put them onto a YouTube channel, and then continue to produce more content. We're just, like I said, we need to speak to somebody who really knows this world, because the way we did it in the Facebook group was probably not the most efficient way or the most effective, but that's just how we just wanted to jump right in. Otherwise with the way that her and I both are is if you can put something off by focusing on the logistics, I would tend to do that. So would she. So we wanted to just not focus on the logistics and dive right in so we could prove to ourselves that we could do this and that it would be good and that it would work. So we did that. But now I think we do need to look at some logistics and
it's a good start though, just to dive right in. I find a lot of people that I talk to that are interested in creating content, they'll spend too much time planning and then get stuck in that planning stage when it's really like a snowball. You just kind of start it and then get a little push and see where it goes, and then just continue to help it grow, nourish it. Even when I started this podcast, I started doing just solo casts with me just speaking on my own, and it was kind of the same thing. I just started it, didn't really have any plan, and then I slowly evolved to now reaching out, interviewing people, and I actually have a virtual assistant that helps me with that now, but I message you directly just because I already follow the various accounts that I follow is it your father's account, or it's just someone that manages that account?
A gentleman, a really nice guy, started that account, and when our dad passed away, it really blew up. He got hundreds of thousands of followers in a matter of a week, so he handed it over actually to my siblings and I. My sister Sky does most of the posting on it.
Okay.
But it's our account now.
That's really nice. So I was even just thinking, could you see that evolving into a podcast, something where you and your sister sit down and have conversations? And if you get an opportunity, have a listen to the Bruce Lee podcast, because Sharon and Shannon Lee, Bruce Lee's daughters, they actually run that. And it actually reminded me of something that you guys could, it was very similar. Something you could see happening?
I totally could see that happening. We definitely want to be in a place where we are consistently doing this, at least, you know, even if it's just once a month, something where, you know, we're in it, because it's easy when you're not in it to get away from it. She has 3 kids. I have 1. I've got the restaurant. You know, we both have a lot going on, and it's like, but it's like you said with the snowball effect. Even when I would, when we were writing this book, sometimes I would sit down to write, and I would not really know what I was going to write about, but I would just have a, you know, I'm going to write about this that happened to me today. And it would turn into 10 pages of some of my best writing, because sometimes it's just the act of doing it that inspires you. And the idea is sort of, you know, our dad used to talk about how there's a difference between motivation and inspiration. And motivation is when, there's nothing wrong with motivation, but just that when you're motivated, it's like you are trying to get a hold of an idea, and you're excited and you're determined and you're going to do this. And that's all good. And that's a big part of life. But when you're inspired, the idea gets a hold of you. And it's like, you know, there's the quote that dormant forces and faculties come alive. And you discover yourself to be a greater person by far when you're inspired, when you're in this state of, you know, this idea got a hold of me, and no matter what, I can't not do it. And so I seek to be in a place of feeling inspired in my work daily. And when it switches to the motivation, that's okay, because sometimes it is about motivation. You got to set your alarm clock. You got to be diligent. You have to push yourself. But my favorite is when I get into these pockets of time where I feel inspired, you know, in spirit. And then I think that's similar with the motivation. It's like that's when the veil gets a little bit thinner.
It seems like inspiration would correlate with being the host of God, as we were covering earlier, being a pseudopod, because you're just really opening up, allowing yourself, you're almost just casting your sails and let the winds take you, right? You're just facilitating the, you know, whatever you can, and just be that best version of you, and just what comes out of it.
Yeah, and when that ego gets a hold of you, you almost roll your eyes at those thoughts and those ideas, because you're so far removed from it, you know. And I think it's I find for myself it's just a constant wave between those two ends of the spectrum, and you're going to have both in your life, and that's the only way to know which one you want more of, you know, and work towards.
And I guess it really is in that silence. If you just like let the ego do its thing, let it have its moment, but then just get to that silence. And then you can really experience truth, you know, as opposed to all that clutter that comes before it. So, it's really great. I think we've covered quite a bit here. Did you have any closing thoughts or anything you wanted to share with anyone that's listening to this?
I would say, you know, like we've been talking about, if you have the choice to be a host to God or a hostage to your ego, in everything that you do, you have that choice. So just remember to be a host to God as much as you can. And I think that, you know, just a quick little story. In one of the videos that we did for our course, my sister told a story about how she served somebody, how she was of service to somebody, and how it ended up serving her in such a huge way. It's a long story, but I was reminded when she told that story, I have heard so many times from my dad, also from a woman named Karen Noe, that I've read her books and followed her. You should be saying to the universe, how may I serve? Because when you say to the universe, how may I serve? The universe says back, how may I serve you? Versus when you say, gimme, 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 the universe says, give me, give me, give me back. So I was reminded of that, and it was something I had been doing for a while and then stopped. So when I was back here in New York, I started to say that again. Every time I would leave my apartment, I would say, okay, you know, God, universe, whatever, please give me an opportunity to serve while I'm out today. And I found that each time I was out, sometimes it would be something really small, like holding the door for somebody, offering a smile to somebody who's, you know, maybe a homeless person or someone who looks down, giving $1 to a homeless person, whatever it was. But then the other day I had a really cool opportunity to serve in it. There was a woman, and she was screaming out, not screaming, but saying, can somebody help me? Can somebody help me? And she looked a little, I don't know. I understand in New York why you might keep walking, because you don't know. You live in a city. I mean, you don't know if somebody might be.
I visited New York, and I understand the New York there. They do just straight line walk, don't even look.
Keep going, and I've definitely done that before. But this woman's energy and her vibe just struck me as someone who genuinely needed help. So I watched the people ahead of me keep walking, and I stopped, and I could tell as I got closer that she was blind. And I said, what do you need help with? And she said, I've lost my way. I normally know where I am, and I've gotten completely, discombobulated, and I'm confused. Can you just help me hail a cab so I can get back to where I live? And it was so simple. I walked out on the street and I hailed her a cab, and I helped her get into it. And about 3 or 4 people were watching this go down and came up to me after and said, that was so nice of you to do that. I was just prepared to just keep walking. And it was no big deal. And I don't tell the story to like toot my own horn. I mean, I have been the person who keeps walking for sure. But I grew up hearing from my dad that when somebody does an act of kindness or serves somebody else, they did a study. And not only does it increase the person who's receiving the act of kindness, their serotonin goes up. The person who's giving the act of kindness, their serotonin gives up. And serotonin is feeling good, it's the good feeling neurotransmitters. But then even more so, people who observe a act of kindness, their levels of serotonin increase too. So it's like just one simple act of kindness affects a whole myriad of people. And it makes you feel good. And when you feel good, I think you're feeling God, and you're feeling the things we've been talking about here. You're feeling inspiration. And it's almost like kindness is contagious, because whenever I see somebody giving an act of kindness, it almost makes me think, like, what have I done today to serve somebody? Probably nothing. I should put that on, make that a priority at some point for the rest of the day. And I don't know. I just felt compelled to tell you that story and leave you with that.
That's a beautiful story. I love it. And I was just about to say, I bet the people watching probably experienced their own uplifting feelings for the day. And who knows, maybe they just carried that on the next day. They started to, instead of walking by, they would go and help that individual. And that's really just how you start to plant those seeds and spread those seeds everywhere. And every individual has the power to do that. I don't think that enough people realize that. I think that they don't understand what you just explained, that it is a rippling effect, that you could do this one little act. It's not isolated to this little act. And, the mind doesn't necessarily have to comprehend the vast, ripples that may occur, but just understand that, it's all in the greater good when you do those things. So that's a really amazing closing thought. Thank you for sharing it. Yeah. And did you have anything, like any social website, anything you wanted to plug or share before we hop off? I'll include everything in the description of the episode as well, so people can pop down there and just grab the links quickly. But anything?
Yeah, my Instagram handle is Saje Dyer, Sage.Dyer, and my name is spelled S-A-J-E, which is confusing. Most people think it's a G. I have a children's book called Goodbye Bumps, and I'll definitely have a website up soon. That's one of those logistical things that I decided to put on the back burner till we just dove right in. But my sister has a website, serenadyer.com, and we typically post the same things about events. Cool. Yeah.
I'll check in with you after, you maybe even just let me know when you run another one of those courses, when you actually have just let me know, and then I can share it and see if we can get some people interested as well from my pages. And because I really appreciate what you're doing, I appreciate the message, and that's why I wanted to reach out and have this conversation. So thank you for taking the time.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, soon.
Okay, awesome. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
You too.